square corners. Tang is not right in the middle, which is kind of annoying, but by the time it's in a handle, no one will know. Don't tell anyone, Vince. First. I'll have a little bit of time running over some trisacks. You can go nuts with the trisacks, so you can go up to, Vince, you'll know more about this than I do, A30, 800 grit, yeah? So we'll go up to about an A30. I've got a couple of finer belts, but again, you don't have to go nuts with polishing. I think if it's a mono steel, you don't have to go too nuts too quickly. If it's a pattern weld, you know, if it's pretty bold, you don't need to go nuts. You can still see a pattern, even if it's, so that's a 160, that's a 100. And what I like to do is I like to make myself a nice little pile of belts and then work from top to bottom. And progressively, as you go through the grits, it should be a little bit quicker on each grit because you're digging out less scratches. That's the idea. So I'm going to start with an A300, which is the coarsest one. It's about 80 grit, is it?
Almost, yeah.
Something like that, yeah. Jack, do you fancy sorting me out with some more belts whilst I get grinding? Could you do me a little run? I've got a 160, a 100 there. I could do with an 85, a 40 and a 30 probably. Just have a dig through these, mate, and I'll, yeah, I just want to get on with this grinding so that I can get polished. Get polished and out! As interesting as it'd be watching me go through a massive stack of belts. So I can either, basically, the next stage is to probably put a handle on. So we're going to glue up a handle, and then I can get all of these bits married together with a bit of wood, shape the handle up roughly, or I might just finish shaping handle before I etch and everything. So that's pretty much a polish, and that's a trisac polish. What's taken 20 minutes, half an hour? And we've gone from a 60 grit finish all the way up to an 800 grit finish on the trisacs on the cotton mop. And it's not a bad finish, it's not a mirror finish. I haven't been near it with a bit of sandpaper or a brick. So that is instantly winning. I'm half tempted to actually take it back a step. So I might put everything over, I might finish the bolster up, stick the handle on, and I might put it on a fine Scotch-Brite just to make sure everything's a nice uniform grain finish as opposed to a mirror polish. Now the problem with Scotch-Brites, they will dig out deep scratches, but you won't get them out in a uniform way unless you're very, very uniform with everything. So the trisacs do a really good job of quickly finishing stuff. I think, anyway. I think they're great. They last a lot longer than most polishing belts, so the Cubitrons and ceramic belts and stuff, higher grit will actually put a lot of heat into stuff very quickly. Whereas the negators keep stuff nice and cool and cut very efficiently, which is, again, that's a win-win. We've got a nice thin pointy tip on there. So all the way behind the edge, we're up to, this caliper's set at 1 millimeters. So we're 1 millimeter up to, you know, fairly thin, you know. So we're 1 millimeter here, which is good, you know, thin for the win. Forging tool steel's really thin and uniform is quite hard. I'm still getting used to it, and every day's a school day. I reckon what we need to do is I'm going to tidy up this transition here before I fit a handle, which I haven't been anywhere near. I'm just going to do that with a 60 grit belt. Just whittle it down a little bit, make it nice and uniform, and then I'll think about fitting a handle on, I'm going to use some 5-minute epoxy so it will go off fairly quickly, and that'll be good. squared that up really nicely. I need a little bit more off this side, look. Down a fraction to keep it in line. That side's good. This corner needs to come down a spot. That is roughly square, square enough for me. I'm just going to take this up to here again because I've got a little bit more to whip off here. Once I've whipped that off, we'll burn fit a handle, glue it up, shape handle, polish up the spine and the choil and the bolster, and get it into etch. Simples. In a minute, once I've burn fit, I'm going to put a few little notches on here to make sure the glue sort of helps it sit in place. So now we've got square corners. Tang is not right in the middle, which is kind of annoying, but by the time it's in a handle, no one will know. Don't tell anyone, Vince. Burn fit. This is a nice bit of smoky joy. We've got a round hole and a square peg, as is my life. So I'm gonna get the square peg hot and stick it in the round hole. So I'm just gonna warm it up to here. This has got a kind of dual purpose, kind of we're annealing the tang a little bit, which I didn't fully harden because it's a bit chunkier. Look how quickly that's hot. Lovely. Last one. There you go. So we now have a square peg and a square hole, which is going to fit exactly, almost exactly, with a little bit of space for epoxy. So that will go in there very nicely. So this isn't even warm because I've got that bit hot. This is starting to get a bit warm. We don't want the heat to travel down to the edge. So I'm just going to pop them in some water for a few seconds to make sure that the warm stays here. Now this bit, what I've done there is I've just heated it up. So I've essentially annealed or softened all of this bit. Because this bit's softened, it's going to be tougher, less likely to snap, because if any point it's going to be weak, it's going to be the very, very thin bits, and this bit, which is the transition between the handle and the blade, where all the stresses are going in. So we don't want that particularly hard. I'd rather have it tough. So if it's going to do anything, it'll bend as opposed to snap. So I'm not actually dipping the whole bit in the water. I'm trying to avoid getting this bit wet. You can see here, because this bit is going to be fairly soft. That's going to hold heat. That's going to be a big heat sink from there as well. If I do quench it when it was red hot, like, you know, that sort of thing, that would make it even more brittle again. So we don't really want to make it brittle, we want to keep it hard. And for our next trick, we will be gluing this piece of wood to this bit of metal. Super fancy. Right, to make this transition between the bolster and the tang really, really crispy and nice, which is one of those things which is difficult to do unless you spend ages and ages and ages filing and fitting and filing and fitting, which you can do, which is not a problem. What I'm going to use, so it's this way up, that's the flushest fit, that's where I burn fit it. Just going to mark it so I know which way's up. So that's going to go together like that. This milliput 2-part epoxy putty, I have this, I'm a really big fan of bog oak, so bog oak's my go-to handle material. It just so happens to come up really, really rich and dark and black, which helps with dirty fingerprints in kitchens and in workshops, and it also helps with the fit up. So if I mix this 2-part milliput up and a little bit of this 2-part epoxy up, I'm going to fill this hole with epoxy. I'm going to put milliput just around the edge of the tang. It's going to help blend the bolster into the handle nice and easily with no gaps. If you put epoxy on there, you can do a thing where you mix epoxy resin with wood dust and things like that. If you use the same wood dust, then you end up with a similar sort of colour, but I find that the milliput is a dead handy, sneaky top tip, if you fancy a dead handy, sneaky top tip. So that's going that way. The milliput I've mixed up. I'm just going to put all around here, which actually the milliput sets hard. It's an epoxy putty, so it'll set as hard as the epoxy pretty much, but I'm only trying to use it to fill a tiny void if there's a tiny void. So that's in there like that. I'm going to use this to mix up my epoxy because I can. West System G-Flex epoxy is really good, but it's a 24-hour cure. It gives you a little bit more movement between the joints, between the wood and the metal, but it's a 24-hour cure. Today, we don't have 24 hours. So I'm just going to try and get that into the hole, all in there. And when I pop the Tang in, it'll all come squishing out. It basically beds it in, fills any voids. Well, there shouldn't be many voids because I put a square peg in a round hole, and that amount of epoxy should be enough to just come squashing out the end. So epoxy in the hole. Which way up is it? It's that way up. So I'm going to move that way up, this way up. That's going to go in there. And then as I push it in, I should get the milliput squashing out the edge and the epoxy holding it. So that should have a really nice fitted finish when I come to grinding it back. Now I don't grind it back until it's gone off. Going off, it'll give it like 10 minutes or so. Put a bit of weight behind it, get them in there. And yeah, that's a glue up. So we've got handle glue up. All of this milliput that's just been forced out is basically going to give you a really good fit in between the bolster and the bit of wood. Simple as that. Leave that to go off, drink coffee and eat pies. So, I've bought myself this, which I'm going to make a base for. I'm going to make a sink bridge across the top so I can put my whetstones on top and it will stop water from dripping all over the place, which is going to be really nice. If I drop any of those bricks or any of the nice bricks and stuff onto a bit of metal or onto a bit of ceramic or onto a bit of anything like that, I'll chip the bricks. So having a nice bit of wood means I can leave the bricks in there without worrying about everything going ruined. Getting ruined rather. What a nice water vessel, eh? You know, I feel like it's important to have nice things to make nice things. I make nice things to help people make nice things, so I should have nice things to make nice things, because that's nice.
Just very quick shout out to our sponsors. We've got Clark Knives, who do the heat treatment for knife makers and sell the ready to grind Damascus billets, Multi-Tool Products, who do the 84 Engineering belt grinders, and GFS Knife Supplies. They are a small family run business which is a one-stop shop for all your knife making needs. They do the abrasive belts, carbon steels and knife handle materials for knife making, some quenching oils and the rock blade heat kilns. Please click the links in the description below because they help us in making more videos like this.
So we've got a rough handle glued on, and I'm just going to make sure it's all straight, and I'm going to get in here and shake the handle up whilst it's in place, trying to keep all of this lot nice and tidy. And I'm going to do that primarily on a really coarse belt to just whip some off, and then I'm going to go to a 60 grit and I'm going to tidy it up a little bit. Then I'm going to polish up all around here and we'll be ready to etch. Nice thing, everything's flush here. Now I'm going to polish up here, here and here. Probably going to use that soft wheel again. I'm actually just going to bang on a Scotch-Brite. I'm going to whip a Scotch-Brite over everything quickly just to give it a nice uniform grain, and then put a bit of oil on the handle and probably etch it up for you. You get a really nice uniform pattern with the Scotch-Brites, and it's sometimes I think going too far to make sure you've eliminated all of the deeper scratches and then bringing it back a little bit so you've got a very uniform scratch pattern is the way forward sometimes. Because again, I've got quite a bold pattern going through there, so by the time I've etched it, the really, really shallow scratches, you're not going to notice much. I'm going to etch it and polish it back again. So
Not really much need to have a super uniform finish. The important bits though are to have a nice transition here, a nice rounded choil, nice rounded spine, so that none of the bits that aren't supposed to be sharp aren't sharp. There's sharp bits where they're not supposed to be sharp, hurts. I'm just going to pop a little bit of Odie's oil on the handle because it's actually only at 60 grit. It's actually not a bad finish for that. I could take it up loads further, but I don't really see the need a lot of the time. Tiny bit of sandpaper under the bottom of there to get the uniform grain finish. So I'm more worried about the scratches going the right way than I am about giving it a really, because the bog oak I'm using here is 5,500 years old. It's really, really nice, rich, dark wood from the UK. Lovely stuff, but there's not an awful lot. I mean, there is a lot going on in it, but by the time I've put a bit of oil on it, it's going to go so dark that there's no point, not really much point in bringing it up to a stupid high finish. If you take it up to a silly, silly high finish, the chances are it just ends up looking a bit plastic. And I want my wood to look like wood, because it's wood. There we are, Odie's oil. This stuff's the absolute nuts. It's imported from America, or you can get some from Europe now, and you just use a tiny, tiny bit. Put it on for 20 minutes, leave it, and then wipe it off, and you end up with a beautiful waterproof, and see the colour that's gone. So that's gone from that colour through to this really, really rich, dark, lovely black finish. I want to make sure the wood's fairly sealed up before I stick it anywhere near any acid, because I don't want the acid to get into the wood. The wood's this colour because it's been sat in an acidic bog for the last 5,500 years. So the wood's actually been pickled. And because oak's rich in tannins, the pickle turns the wood black, and you get a really nice gradient through from the outside to the inside of the wood. Good stuff, and that's a really nice, that's a rich, rich, dark, lovely looking bit of wood. I'm going to give it a few minutes just to soak it. We'll have them into some acid and you'll see the fruits of all of these labours. And the other thing is, as you go through the process, you'll be amazed how the balance point kind of it's a big knife, but the balance point's kind of in the right place, just in front of the choil. It's just there, it's not too heavy. And yeah, it's a good thing, I like it. There we are, we'll leave that for a little while. Let's have a gander. The feather pattern knife, I made it myself with my bare hands and a power hammer and some grinders and some angle grinders, and yeah, a little bit of help from my friends. There you go, happy days.